Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I think we are recording now.
Hmm.
And today we are here to talk about some recent political events in West Asia, the Saudi Pakistan arrangement that has been announced. And we were going to take a look at the domestic political scenario in the United States also. We try to be very little US focused in this endeavor, but sometimes the news from the US ends up dominating world news. And this month has been uh, turbulent to say the least in the United States. There have been killings like that of Charlie Kirk, and then there have been memorial marches, protests, some other killings also, many passionate debates around migration, immigration. So we'll just try to deep dive into that also a bit, because these have been the dominant course of the things that have been talked about in the last few weeks or so. So Jay, let's talk about the Saudi Pakistan arrangement before we get to the American issues. So what do you think of it? Let's get your opening thoughts.
Uh, there are a lot of political scientists and think tanks, quote unquote, who are very quick to jump on a bandwagon which thinks that the Saudi Pakistan arrangement is pointed towards India. That is actually not correct. The reason why this arrangement with Pakistan has been signed is because not in the history of the Al Saud family have they been threatened like this, and their hegemony in the Middle East has been threatened like this with respect to the blatant violations of all types of agreements and understandings with respect to Israel. Israel literally hitting Doha and hitting Syrian targets. They're not just restricting themselves to Iran, they're hitting all the other targets as well. So, in a scenario like that, if say the Saudis or the Al Saud become less popular amongst the masses, specifically the Sunnis, which start viewing the Saud families not the true representation, they would need a neutral party's help. And that neutral party in this particular scenario is Pakistan. Pakistan's relationship with the Arab world is not new. Why would it be new? Because Pakistan is like the dominant forefront. I would say it is the most powerful Muslim country. It is one of the most powerful Muslim countries in the world because I would say it is the most powerful Muslim country in the world because it has a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I mean,
And
just to add to
the,
that, sorry, Jay, don't forget your thought.
Mhm.
Keep at it. I just wanted to say that, like you said,
Mhm.
the relationship between the Saudis and the Pakistanis is historical.
Yes,
There was a collect the let's never forget that the embedding of Mujahideen in Afghanistan to expel the Soviets from there was a collective US, Saudi, and Pakistani effort,
absolutely.
and that in itself gives us a insight into how historical the security relationship has been between the Americans, the Saudis, and Pakistanis.
Yes,
And like you said, after the Israeli strikes on an important Gulf Arab country, the security of American guarantees is in question. And I feel like Saudis are trying to, diversify their strategic mix, and many experts have sort of claimed this before. In India, we find this slightly alarming, and with good reason, because it's one of the things that we have prided ourselves on, is that in the Muslim world also, India has enjoyed good relations with the Gulf Arab nations. So I don't want to get ahead of myself and call this a setback, but in our strategic circles, it should raise the right amount of eyebrows. And this also, to me, indicates the way that Pakistanis try to play their cards smartly, but I don't know how successful they are at it, because this looks a little to me, this looks like a little confused, right? Because in June of this year, when Israelis and Iranians were exchanging missiles over each other, Pakistanis were trying to guarantee to the Iranians that we will be your security guarantor. And now it comes up and signs a strategic military cooperation sort of thing with Saudi Arabia, which in principle is as averse to the Iranians as it is probably to the Israelis, although they're in fact probably more, because no Arab countries are openly criticizing the Israelis anymore. And we know how they're all these the Iranian Shias are almost heretical to the Sunni Arab countries, right? So there is also, I don't know, Pakistan tries to strategically diversify its allies, and it's too soon to say whether this will actually hold any strategic weight. But I also think that India should take good note of this issue.
I I would disagree with you, Raj. I don't think
Okay.
India will definitely take a good note of this, but I'm of the opinion that it is a strategic partnership, or I would say a partnership of convenience, only and only with respect to Middle East. It has got absolutely nothing to do with India. To corroborate that, I will tell you one thing. If someone says that, oh, say India attacks Pakistan, and like one of the primary clauses of the treaty is that Saudi Arabia will also be attacked if say someone else attacks Pakistan. See, that is flawed in its own way because Saudi Arabia's last intervention in a conventional war or a non-conventional war was actually in Yemen, and that was back in 2015 and 2016, and they ended up getting hammered by the Yemeni Houthis. They took such casualties that they eventually had to withdraw and literally depend on the Israeli bombardment of the Houthis to get some sense of control in that area. So now we're talking about a military establishment like India, which is professional, organized. So, you know, the I think the Saudis are very intelligent before, you know, signing such doctrines or like signing such agreements. So I don't think we should be wary. Of course we should notice this, but I don't think it changes anything on the ground. That's my opinion. Number two, I feel there is a lot that we're missing out, specifically with respect to the recent developments in the Middle East. The thing is that the domination of the Arabs as like the forefront of the Islamic world will definitely get challenged in the coming years. The reason why that is happening is because it was in the time of the Arab domination or the control of the two cities, the two holy sites, you had the biggest genocide against the Arabs or the Sunnis take place in the Middle East, right under your nose. And the only people who stood up for the Palestinians in that moment, a lot of people would argue, were the Iranians, a Shia power. So, from that sense, a lot of public perception has actually changed against the Arabs, specifically the Saudis. Now, number three, a very important point. MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, is a person who's towards reform. He's tilted towards reform. He's a person who wants to bring in change. He wants to take Saudi Arabia back to what it was before 1979. 1979 was the Great Grand Mosque siege, which was actually ended by the GIGN. Again, foreign intervention. GIGN is French special forces, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yes, yes, they are
So
French special.
yeah,
Was it GIGN or GSG9? The French one is GIGN. GSGN are the German ones, I
yeah, it
think.
was it was GIGN which
Okay.
conducted the raids. So it was the French who conducted the raids. So again, even in that scenario, even in a raid at the most holy site of Islam, you had the French coming in and saving it. So
I feel
the
like that this is in the 80s, right?
it's
Late.
1979.
Yeah, so this is right at the
That's
time
what
of
I'm
the
saying. Like,
Iranian
can
Revolution,
I
right?
finish? Yeah, can I finish?
Yeah, sorry,
So
sorry.
I'm saying that before I'm saying MBS is trying to take it back before 1979 because before 1979 the image of Saudi Arabia was actually very liberal. Women were
Yeah.
presenting TV shows. It wasn't as orthodox as it was. It was after the seizure of the Grand Mosque, again, which happened after the 1979 revolution. The Sunni power of the Al Saud was threatened. So what they did was to become more orthodox, become more zealous, and give their own interpretation of Wahhabi slash Salafist Islam. So, keeping all of that in mind, now the fact that MBS is going towards reform, you will face a lot of upheavals and a lot of internal challenges. Now, in
Yeah.
order to counter those internal challenges, you would need a neutral Muslim party, which are the Pakistanis, to help them out. And
Yeah.
this hasn't happened for an Arab emirate slash kingdom for the first. It hasn't happened for the first time. It has happened before as well. The Jordanian king during the Black September Revolution was actually rescued by the intervention of General Ziaullah, in which they ended up killing thousands of Palestinians. So the general argument that the Pakistanis or the Pakistani state tries to use that they are pro Palestinian, हम फिलिस्तीन के साथ खड़े हैं, हमने हमेशा इसराइल के खिलाफ आवाज उठाई है। तो एक तरीके से उन्होंने सिर्फ आवाज उठाई है, क्वाइट लिटरली एंड फिगरेटिवली, क्योंकि उसके आगे जो ऑन पेपर उन्होंने चीजें करी है, ऑन ग्राउंड उन्होंने चीजें करी है, that has always been detrimental to a Palestinian state. So
Yeah.
it is for such scenarios that this particular treaty has been signed.
Yeah, yeah, I totally understand this. There is a acknowledgement in the strategic spheres that follow West Asia that let's track it back to history, right? That in 1979, after the Iranian revolutions, the internal pressures start driving Saudis to do more for the pan-Islamic world. And we know that most of the oil-rich areas in Saudi Arabia also have a significant Shia population. In fact, I think around the time of the mosque raids that you are talking about that were conducted by the French, that time I think there were areas in those parts of Saudi where you had started seeing pictures of Ayatollah Khomeini being raised in posters, and you had started seeing people carrying his tapes. So there was great pressure on Saudis to start looking as a counterbalancing act in the Muslim world, right? And that is something which terrorizes them to this day, because they have to appear as a counterbalance to the Iranian lead of the Muslim world. And I think Iranians are trying to claim victory over the Saudis in that way, because Iranians are still dropping missiles on the Israelis, which have created such great genocide against a large Arab population, in fact. So I think that's where the Iranians to this day try to draw leadership in the Muslim world from, right? And this brings me back to the historical relationship of the Saudis with the Pakistanis. It goes all the way back to the 1960s, where the Saudis started, pouring in money into Pakistan. And in the late 70s, in the late 70s, there were Pakistani special services groups, which had a lot of training that they got in Arab nations. There were 19 in many bilateral security agreements that were signed in the 1980s, but nothing sets the tone for the security relationship between the Gulf Arab nations and the Pakistanis like the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, which is when the Pakistanis really served the Saudi and American joint effort. And I think to this day, there is some acknowledgement on the part of the Americans and the Saudis, which is why there is very little that they do that opposes Pakistan's strategic interests. To this day, there will be a subtle implicit backing of the Pakistanis, because Pakistanis, unlike the Indians, us, because we are always concerned with affairs of Pakistan, Pakistanis are very comfortable letting their country and land serve strategic interests for other nations. And I think around the time of Op Sindoor, was it the Pakistani defense minister or a Pakistani foreign minister? One of the two had said that Pakistan has been doing West dirty work for like a very long time. In India, it was seen as an acknowledgement of supporting terrorism, but I see it as a lot more. He was absolutely right. He was spot on to say that Pakistanis have been doing the West dirty work, because the Durand line basically doesn't exist in that area. They have in fact supplied weapons, men, material whenever Mujahideen was being raised, and to this day that serves as the one great cause of Islam that Saudi Arabia has ever supported. And Pakistanis were the tip of the spear in that effort for the Saudis. That's how they look at it. So, yeah, Jay, you've got your hand raised. Sorry for the long gap, but I do agree with me. What do you got?
Sorry to digress a little bit. GIGN actually, if I said in the previous part of this conversation that GIGN actually raided the Grand Mosque, I hope I didn't say that, because GIGN actually advised the Saudi forces into going and raiding the mosque. So because GIGN were non-Muslim, they weren't given the permission to get inside the mosque when the siege was happening. So it was through GIGN's advice. So if I had said that GIGN raided, that was incorrect. It was through GIGN's advice that the eventual raid happened. So I just wanted to put it out there. Or
No, Jay, thank you for
yeah.
saying that. In fact, when we are
Mhm.
editing this, we will
Mhm.
put that text in the first instance
Yes,
GIGN is mentioned, and
yes,
we'll also add later in the episode this is
yes, yes.
corrected. But
Understood.
yeah, I'm just I'm just making note of the historical relationship that the Saudis have, and because Saudi interests in West Asia for so long represented American interests also, right? And Saudis are a very reliable partner for the Americans, and I feel like that in some ways translates to the interests almost being fused in each other. Having said that, I think now the quote unquote rules based international order, and I have such deep dislike for this term because I don't think it exists anymore. I think this term is coined over and over for think tanks to keep themselves relevant in a time where most of their forecasts also don't work. But the you let's look at how the rules based international order has been collapsing in the last few months. It's that we first have an Iran Israel conflict, and Iranians are bombing Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is bombing Tehran. And in the middle of all of this, we have Pakistan come and say that any Pakistani nuke may be uh, used for the efforts of the Iranians against the Israelis. Because now Pakistan also wants to claim some amount of leadership in the Muslim world, right? And eventually that conflict ends with the Iranians doing a choreographed strike, which even the Americans knew about in Qatar, right? And we see that as some sort of collapse of the security guarantees that Americans provide their Gulf Arab allies. So, and uh, beyond reasonable doubt, it can also be proven that Pakistani airspace was used for the bunker buster strikes, quote unquote, that were conducted in Iran against their nuclear assets in Isfahan, Fordo, all these areas. So here you have Pakistanis first saying that we'll support Iran. Then you have Pakistanis saying that we are going to use our nukes to back Iran. Then you have Pakistani airspace being used to bomb Iran by the Americans, and now you have Pakistanis come into a strategic military arrangement with some of the most bitter rivals of the Iranians. So I just think that there is no real forecasting that can be done of this situation, except that it is a desperate attempt on part of both countries. The Saudis to establish some other security guarantee which is outside the United States, and the Pakistanis a little bit to make sure that they become a regional power than the for whatever their ambition is, they can try to become a regional power, and there is naturally a provocation that is being handed to us also here. So a slight attempt is also to provoke India. I think we would be better advised to not make any knee-jerk reactions and maintain our stable relationships with the Gulf Arab states. In India also enjoys. I'll just wrap up my long monologue. But India also enjoys some great relationships in the Arab world. India has a great relationship with Egypt, for example. In fact, Egypt has gone out of its way many times to block a lot of anti-India, pro-Kashmir statements from being published in official OIC records. So, and similarly, we have good relations with other Gulf Arab nations also. So we must maintain that. And we must not heed to the voices which are saying things like, there is very triggering language in this document, and we should just, have some trust in the resilience of our own foreign policy. Back to you, Jay.
Raj, the biggest problem in the present scenario is that everyone has this idea that hysteria sells. That is the
Hmm.
biggest problem in a lot of circles in media and journalism today. It's like, you take something, you blow it out of proportion, you beat the drums again and again so that it catches the eye of the masses. It is very, very important for clickbaity media to put it in such a way that they get more clicks for their revenue generation. And the target audience for this, please don't get me wrong, but it is middle-aged men who are going towards retirement or have already retired and have these on their WhatsApp forwards, and they got get another reason to, like, be extremely angry about things. But the reality is, and we've already discussed this. The reality is that Saudi Arabia knows that India can be and is an important player in world politics, in geopolitics. It cannot be ignored just because of Pakistan's, nonsense. And at the same time, it has to, ensure that Pakistan's geopolitical goals at a domestic front are also met with. How can you do that? By, bringing out a piece of paper which states that, hey, look, we are Saudi Arabia. We have two of the most important Islamic sites under our control, and if someone attacks Pakistan, we'll join the war with you guys. So that is a way of telling the domestic population that we are doing everything in our power to protect you. We are doing everything in our power to get you the things that you want, specifically against India as well. So it is like, it's a very good propaganda piece. But I am very, very confident that I think all the parties involved already knew what the treaty is going to stand for. So, and I'm also quite confident in the in our foreign ministry to have, like, understood the nuances of this particular arrangement. And what are the nuances? We've already discussed it again and again. A growing resentment against the crown, and the only way to deal with that is a reliable partner, which has actually helped out the crown in one of the greatest victories of quote unquote Islamic jihad, that is the jihad against Soviet Union in the modern Islamic history. So yeah, back to you, Raj.
Yeah, in fact, your opinion was largely shared by Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad, who was India's ambassador to multiple Gulf Arab countries, served 2 terms as India's ambassador to Saudi Arabia. I watched his interview on the show done by Karan Thapar at The Wire, and I would have liked it if Karan Thapar would let his esteemed guest talk more than he talks, and typical provocateuring. So it's a segue into what you said, right? The internet almost rewards badly done conversations, more triggering
Absolutely.
conversations, and it drives numbers. So if any persons in our audience are uh, more interested in India's relation with the Gulf, uh, there's a lot of reading material also anywhere. But if you want to listen to YouTube interviews, I'd recommend listening a bit to Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad. There's a very good episode done by uh, Kapil Sibal with Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad and Shiv Shankar Menon and Vivek Karju, all stalwarts of the Foreign Service. This was around the Iranian-Israeli crisis. And I think that conversation taught me a lot about India's relationship with West Asia, the Gulf world, with Iran, with Israel, etc. So, that being said, I think that's just another place where our viewers can go to. But also the fact that Jay, you raised the fact that our algorithms have started rewarding hysteria, right? And I feel like that becomes a good segue into our second topic of the day, because hysteria was uh, driven by the disturbing images of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right? I'm somebody, I could disagree, and I would disagree with 99% of the things that a guy would say. But most sane people who haven't given into the poison of social media's rhetorical drama, we would feel disturbed by the man of a by the images of a man being shot in his neck and blood oozing out. We all saw those images, and the fact that we get minute to minute updates of all these traumas and tragedies, especially the ones that happen in the United States. So it was overall a disturbing sight for me, but it sets the context for a conversation about the importance of trying to undo political violence in the United States. There has been, I wouldn't say an increase in political violence in the United States, but the hysteria around it has certainly started increasing. I would say ever since the raid on the U.S. Capitol by so many supporters, even that was a small act of political violence in itself. We had Donald Trump being shot at last year, and then with the unfortunate assassination of Charlie Kirk. Let's just move with the position that in IndiCast, in our venture, we will call everybody's death unfortunate. This is not a platform where we will preach hate or call anybody that he deserved it or anything like that. We won't say things like that down here. So he could be a far right winger, he could be a far left person. If a man is being exercised for if a man is being shot for exercising his free speech, you're allowed to disagree with him on everything, but not the fact that he has a right to live, right? So that was a little troubling for me. Jay, let's get your opening thoughts, then we'll dig it deeper.
I get what you're saying, The problem is that the lot of things that he said were things that eventually backfired at him, pun intended. Uh, Say the stance that he took with respect to gun violence. He said that if a few deaths happen because of gun violence, that is the price you pay for independence. So, like, for a even for a conservative leader of that stature, you have to be a little responsible as to what you're preaching. Again, I'm not justifying his death. I'm saying how certain ideologies inadvertently attract violence. And at a time when we're living in mass hysteria, at a time when there is so much of misinformation, so much of propaganda that's being driven, and it's very easy to sway the opinion of the masses. It is important that we are responsible, and that is what is basically bothering me a lot. Is because I saw a lot of people come and celebrate his death. I know a few people personally who said that, oh, he said this about the Palestinians and now he does not exist. So it's like and these, mind you, these are Indians. They have got absolutely nothing to do with Palestine or the United States of America. So it made me think hard that to what extent are we as a society or as a people have degraded that celebrating someone's assassination like that has become the new norm. And it all boils down to the propaganda and the hate that is actually being perpetuated by people from the far right organizations as well. The type of things that they say about people from the LGBTQI communities, what they say about black people, what they say about Hispanics. So it's like, hate begets hate. If you if you're trying to fan extremist tendencies on one side, it is going to automatically fan extremist tendencies on the other side as well. So that's why I always bring this up, is because India is a country which has seen this type of violence a lot, and it hasn't seen this type of violence on a left wing, right wing scale. It has seen this type of violence between religions. So essentially, between far right organizations coming at each other's throats. So it was the Muslim League, Borla Minto reforms. In response to that, you had Hindu Mahasabha come up. After Hindu Mahasabha, you had the creation of RSS. So, hate begets hate. So, specifically in this time, looking at United States condition, it is very important that we are responsible. And unfortunately, all the people that are representing Donald Trump at the world stage and at the domestic stage, they're not doing a good job at all. And in fact, Donald Trump has taken the playbook from I would say South Asia. I'm not taking the names of the country, but I say that Donald Trump has taken the playbook from South Asia to actually go and raid homes of people who actually disagree with him. Imagine a person like John Bolton, a stalwart conservative Republican. मैं कोट एंड कोट हिंदी में उसको एक विद्वान आदमी कहेंगे.
For
उसके घर
sure, yeah.
उसके घर पे रेड पड़ रही है. उसके घर पे रेड
Yeah.
पड़ रही है, and apparently classified documents are taken. These things are expected from third world countries. These things are expected from the quote unquote uncivilized world, which the Americans claim to have, uh, berated and said so many things about, because they are like the shining example, as at least on paper they should be seen as the shining example of civilization. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, because of the
sorry.
political, sorry, I'll hold your thought.
Yeah, go on. Go on.
Because of the political scenario right now, I think that's going away day by day. And it is not just reflecting in the growing hatred against the Indians. That is on an all-time high, in my opinion, because there are a lot of cases of murders against Indians that are coming up. And we recently saw the extremely graphic images of Dallas, Texas, where an Indian man was literally decapitated. I feel that also has a lot to do with the policies that are being implemented at the political level. It is said that the person who had killed that Indian motel manager was actually an illegal immigrant from Cuba, and he was actually detained by the ICE, but later let go because the Cubans would not accept him, because he was already a history sheeter. He had a lot of crimes against himself. So why was he let out in an environment like that? Why was he allowed to be part of society again? Why wasn't background checks done on him? And the way he killed that guy, that only and only comes from this hatred, this passionate hatred against Indians, and that can only and only happen by, say, competition, because Indians are considered to be like the ideal minority. Now, if an ideal minority is doing better than quote unquote not so ideal minority, which are the Hispanics would also would start hating Indians. The black people would also start hating Indians.
The
The,
token minority.
exactly, and we have heard this ourselves. A lot of our relatives would prefer to move to white suburban areas rather than stay in, like, Hispanic neighborhoods or black neighborhoods. So it automatically generates a lot of resentment, and the current political scenario is not helping it. I am of the opinion that if the American system allows you to keep weapons, I think Indians should keep weapons for at least the next 3 years.
Yes. Yeah, I think
Hmm.
in any system, and this goes back to their Second Amendment, right?
Hmm.
If any system allows anyone else to keep a weapon, it's like it's like a weird um game theory equation, right? Where if every other person in other homes is like a threat to you, you are better off in the outcomes matrix if you take a more combative stance, in my view. Like if you have
But
your rifles and your AR-15s ready in a suburb, if every other household has an AR-15, then it's just better for you to have a weapon with yourself also. So you're establishing deterrence in that way, in especially troubled neighborhoods. I want to say something more. You've raised your hand, so go
yeah,
ahead.
so to add to what you're saying, I've seen that video of that Indian guy get cut up. I feel you're in Dallas. If they had a shotgun, they could have easily. And in Dallas, in a place like Texas, you like a shotgun, and it would have made a difference. That guy did not stand a chance.
Yeah.
Anyway, good.
Yeah, I also actually wanted to speak a little bit about. I was watching the hearings of the incumbent FBI director, Kash Patel. From however things look like, he won't be FBI director for very long. And how the Americans view it is pretty much how you're saying it, because there exists a lot of rational and a lot of intellectual voices within the United States too. We can't let the mainstreaming of poor opinions on the media cloud our view, because there are a lot of refined opinion makers in the United States, and they are very troubled with the direction in which a lot of their institutions are going. And this is just opinions that we find on the internet, right? I haven't been to the United States in the last 8 9 years, and so we are only gathering opinions from Twitter, news articles, and friends, and all of that. So my take is just a little simple, that institutional erosion has a lot more consequences than you initially assume. So when, for example, if you erode your investigative agencies anywhere in the world, you also teach your potential political opponents on what to do with your investigative agencies, how to go after the people who might have investigated you, although they might have a constitutional mandate themselves. So I was watching those Senate hearings of Kash Patel, and I think one of the senators described it as historical sort of degradation of the FBI, which is, in fact, I think, unfortunate, because let's look at it like this. We have a lot of people who glorify the West in the third world, especially in countries like India, Pakistan, etc., etc. Many people aspire to migrate there and all of that. But if we set aside those ideals, I think in principle, why the United States warrants a degree of uh, admiration from the rest of the world as it has in the past is the ideals they set out in their revolutionary war of independence, which set the tone for a lot of other democracies in the world, which set the tone for our preamble of the Indian constitution as well. That if essentially you're giving primacy of decision making to the people. That's why we the people is exactly how their constitutional preamble starts, and we took inspirational from the American Constitution. It's in the anyone who's read the Lakshmikant UPSC polity book knows this. So we have taken inspiration from French ideals, and we have taken inspiration from American ideals, and our modern democracy was born out of these revolutions or struggles. And to a certain degree, anybody who reads history honors in India knows about the names of John Adams and Benjamin Franklin and all these leaders. Why I'm speaking about the American Revolutionary War of Independence is because the way they set their tone went into their constitution, and it serves as the the guiding charter for a lot of the debates there still. So, for example, the right to bear arms has been coded into their constitution for so long, but at the time, people argue that arms were not that complex. You would take a long time to load a musket, for example, but now you have AR-15s. So, should we have a new governing mechanism around it? So, these are really complex debates, and it's really unfortunate to see a country that first championed free speech to let its discourse get eroded like this. Because if you are setting the tone in a positive sense, sometimes you could do the exact opposite of it also. I'm not a big supporter of the US, especially their actions in the Middle East. But if one or two things have to be admired, it was that their academic environment was always well guarded, well protected. So I may not defend Charlie Kirk on anything. I may dislike everything that comes out of that man's mouth. But one thing that we should never disagree on in these issues is that I should never be against your right to live. I will disagree with you on everything except your right to live. That's my only disappointment in these recent times. And it's not like the academic environment of the United States or the intellectuals of the United States have vanished. They very much still exist. It's just that, like you said, Jay, it's only the hysterical kind of voices which get more traction. Back to you.
Absolutely. I think you summarized it extremely well. And the fact of the matter is that if you have comedians like Jimmy Kimmel, their shows being cancelled anyway, but he's back. His show's back, by the way. So
Yeah.
and that's a good sign. And I mean, these things you expect from countries in South Asia. Like, you don't expect it from the United States of America. And as you've said, if it has championed free speech, liberty, and so many other ideals which are like quintessential in a democracy, seeing it eroded is actually a very big tragedy. And as you said, we don't. We have. I think you said you don't support the United States. My whole understanding of the United States it comes from an idea that it is just another iteration of the East India Company. My understanding of the United States is like an antagonist, but there is still a lot to be admired. And what was admirable about the United States was that you could say anything to the leaders, you could and still get away with it, and you could champion free speech, and you could also ensure that if you say anything, your life will not be threatened. And unfortunately, that is not the reality anymore. And obviously, this can also be debated because there are a lot of people, specifically from the African American community, who would say that they didn't even have these basic rights till the civil rights movements, championed these rights, and it's only after the 70s and the 80s they started feeling some types of semblance, and it basically hit its apogee with Obama coming to power. Now Obama gone, with Trumpian politics coming in way, you can actually see a lot of African Americans feel that there has been a degradation and they're moving backwards from all the promises
Mhm.
that were made. So yeah, this is where I'm going to
Yeah.
end my conversation, end my part of the conversation. Raj, back to you.
I mean, I always like to drive a difference between the American people and their academic intelligentsia and the American empire. So, if the American empire has started wars, it is some of the most refined American intellectuals who have opposed it also. And as many of them have risked their lives to oppose war, to oppose the quote unquote military industrial complex and those kind of things, right? So I wouldn't want to hold the actions of the American empire or the US foreign policy architecture, which is a handful of foreign policy elites, right? Which is the DoD with historical influence from many think tanks and lobbyist groups and all of that. So I would like to say that this is not the popular position even in the United States. There are many people in the United States who have opposed war, who have opposed its own actions. And what gets frustrating is that when your own governments use your taxpayer money to fuel it into conflicts you don't want to be a part of. Many people in the early 2000s also, not policy minds, not West Asia experts, regular people also were opposed to the idea of Americans invading in Iraq, because even they had that much wisdom to know that Saddam Hussein is not the guy who did 9/11, and he's not hand in glove with Osama bin Laden. In
And guess
fact,
who did 9/11? Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. It's a
yeah,
great
in
way to
fact,
conclude the
yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
Great way to.
yeah. In
Sorry.
fact, for all you know, that Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein probably hated each other's
Of
guts,
course, they did.
and that's as realistic as you could be. But what the U.S. foreign policy architecture did was that they started eliminating enemies of Israel instead, because of the foreign policy influence that the Israelis enjoy over the Americans, and as a result, we start seeing degradation of Baathist parties across Arabs who have historically been a counterbalance to extremist forces. It's crazy that when the Iraqi army was disbanded, many of its members joined the Al Qaeda, but they were earlier part of a secular Baathist army. So many times it was about national prestige and the lack of dialogue that pushed so many people into it.
Absolutely.
There were sections there were sections within the CIA which were totally opposed to interventions in Iraq, because they knew that there are people in Iraq who can be worked with. You need not disband the Iraqi army. You need not bomb Baghdad and turn it into like what's the word?
Gaza.
What's Yeah, yeah. You don't need to bomb it like an inferno. That's how Baghdad used to look like in 2003, right? So I think that the popular American position for the common man also saw it. Like, we oftentimes don't give the common man enough credit, but their political wisdom exists in the common
Absolutely.
man also. So I was listening to Scott Horton, who became a major libertarian voice against war and became a bold voice against the military industrial complex. And he came on the Lex Friedman show, and he actually started his career as a cab driver, and he would talk to people and get their opinions about 9/11, get their opinions about US interventionism. And his position was that most of the guys who would be working construction and they would be working like odd jobs, even they would say things like, I don't think Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden are friends, so why are we doing this? So I would like to just conclude with the point that, like many governments in the world, US foreign policy architecture has in the past misled its people. It's drowned it's drained its taxpayer money. And lately, in conservative circles in the United States, US support for Israel is slowly becoming more and more unpopular. In fact, you mentioned 9/11, Jay. So I'll just end with an anecdote that Muhammad Atta, who flew one of those planes into the Twin Towers, and I'm quoting Scott Horton on this, was actually doing what he was doing to attack the Americans for what they did to in a massacre near Lebanon, actually. So you have a Egyptian man attacking the US for a massacre that's happened in Lebanon. Uh, who conducted the massacre? It was Israel. So it's American support for Israel that, I'm not blaming the Israelis for the 9/11 attacks, but it did play a role in
Of
isolating the
course.
American position in West Asia. And anyone who followed West Asia in the 1990s and early 2000s could have guessed that it was coming up, because you had the attack on USS Cole, you had many American embassies being targeted before 9/11. So there was an incremental curve. And then that unfortunately ended with the most devastating terror attacks in the world. And yeah, and the lives of so many innocent people lost, 340 something firefighters and all of that. And that's the average American who paid the price, who had nothing to do with supporting Israel, right? So
Anyway, that I think we can conclude the conversation. And yeah, Raj, back to you.
yeah, I think, thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you for joining us, and keep
Keep
following us,
engaging
keep
with our
working.
content.
Yeah, and shout out to Vishal, a friend from Bangalore, who suggested that we talk about the Saudi Pakistan treaty. So shout out to Vishal What's up,
Thanks,
man?
Vishal.
Thanks,
We'll
Vishal.
see you soon. And please support our content, give us feedback,
Yeah.
disagree with us. We like disagreement. So just take
Mhm.
a comment section. You have
Yeah, we
thoughts,
had a pretty
write with
good
it,
engagement in the Manipur episode.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
like some
So
dialogue, huh?
yeah.
Yeah.
So please let's just try to
Mhm.
let's just try to revive some respectful dialogue on social
Yes.
media. Just a small amount.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for
Chalo,
joining us,
bye.
guys.
See you. Take care.
Bye bye.
बंद कर दो